I have never read this much, like ever in my life. But this past summer, I read about 20 or more books that were just so good. Some of them were just downright amazing. Like I could not leave them aside. Like I just had to be reading them all the time. So if you guys want some really good book recommendations or just want to see me geek out about some of my favorite books and authors, then let's just get right into it. Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. My name is Nandini and I'm a rising sophomore studying journalism and dramatic literature at New York University. In this video, I'm going to give you some really good book recommendations like I said before. All of them are going to be short descriptions so you can pick one, whichever one that you like. If you guys follow my book blog, you can get to know all the summaries of all the books that I'm currently reading, and you can also follow me on Instagram where I keep you guys updated on all the books that I'm reading. So go ahead and do that, and now let's just get right into the video. The first one we have here is Gold Dust by Ibrahim Al-Koni. This one was a very different and interesting read for me because it's written in a very poetic and mystical way. It's also a very short read. The main plot of the story revolves around a man and his relationship with his camel. The camel is heavily personified, so you almost feel like you're reading about a person rather than an animal. And there are also very interesting and mystical things happening in this book. For example, there are prophetic cave paintings and there are like jinns in the desert, all of which really make this book an interesting one. Next, we have Kafka on the Shore by Murakami. Now, I know you all must have heard about Kafka on the Shore and Murakami, so let's just keep this one quite short. Now, Murakami's writing has fascinated people all around the world, and deservedly so. I don't really know how I can describe his writing style unless you read this book or read any of the other works by Murakami, because it's very different and unique. Yet it's unique at the point that it keeps you hooked to anything that he writes. The plot of this book revolves around a boy who runs away from home because he doesn't really like his father and his like sort of rule in the house, and he also wants to look for his lost mother and sister. Parallelly runs the story of a dude who can talk to cats, and his name is Nakata, and both of these stories sort of submerge, and that submersion is just so satisfying to read because you are just like hooked to the book. There are a lot of like mystical things happening in the book as well. For instance, there are like cats talking to people, there are like fish falling from the sky, and there are girl ghosts. So if you're into magical realism, I would highly recommend checking this one out. Next we have The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I'm sure you guys must have heard about this book as well. Everywhere I go, I see people holding a copy of this book. I see people talking about this book. I see it everywhere on TikTok, even though I'm not on TikTok, but like Instagram and stuff. I see it everywhere. So you might think by reading the title, Achilles, and the summary that you need to know a lot about Greek mythology to really understand this book. But that's really not the case because I don't know anything, like zero. I know nothing about Greek mythology yet. After reading the first 2 chapters of this book, I was so into it that I loved it till the very end. So this one's about Achilles and his partner Patroclus and their life and like the sacrifices they have to make because of all the negative ploys that are going on around them. Warning, this one can really make you cry. Next we have Laura Day's The Last Thing He Told Me. I've spoken about some of these books in a previous book blog of mine, so you can go ahead and check out that video. It's a more detailed description of some of the books that I'm mentioning in this video, so you can check that out after this video. So anyways, The Last Thing He Told Me is a book that can easily get you out of a reading slump because it's a very short, easy read. You can probably finish it in a day, in a single setting and stuff like that. There's not too much of like metaphors and overly dramatic descriptions. It just gets straight into the point, which is the kind of reading I usually like to do. So you can definitely check this book out if you're like interested in like a very fast-paced family mystery. The plot of this book revolves around Michael Owens, who is the husband of Hannah, who leaves Hannah with just one note with the 2 words "protect her" written on them, and that is in reference to their daughter Bailey. He suddenly disappears after that, and then it's just sort of Hannah and Bailey's life on how they try and figure out what happened to their husband and father respectively and what his sort of dark past is like. So if you're into mysteries, particularly family mysteries, check this one out. We we have Kim Jiyoung, born 1982 by Cho Nam-ju. This was the first book that I read that's ever from a Korean author, and I absolutely enjoyed it and sort of even related to it. It's the story of Kim Jiyoung, and her story is detailed through chapters in the form of like childhood to adulthood, so you really get to know the character very well. We realize as readers that Kim Jiyoung has fallen into a psychosis, but that reason as to why she fell into that kind of mental state is not immediately clear. As you keep reading, you realize that it's because of the big gender gap between male and female status and respect in South Korea. So this book is very inspirational and well researched because it really takes you down to the root of South Korea's feminist movement. We have Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Now, I have never probably read a memoir before this, and I'm really glad I started with this one because it's very well recognized and oh my god, so very well written. It's very heartfelt. It's about the story of Emily Doe, or rather Chanel Miller, because that's her real name, and her sexual assault case that happened on Stanford's campus, and how she sort of came to terms with the horrific incident, if I had to put it that way, that happened to her. But more importantly, it's about her fighting against a criminal justice system that is not designed to protect the vulnerable, and how corrupt and sort of stale and bad it's become. And it's her sort of relentless fight against that kind of system. So it's really brave, it's bold, it's vulnerable, it's inspirational. Next we have Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This is one of those books that you can probably finish in one sitting in one day. It's an easy, short read. It flows by like a breeze, but it centers around on a very important topic that all of us should read about. It's one of those books that does not have a lot going on. There's not much details to the plot. There's no big plot twist. There's no big like major character development, but you stay for out of the world writing. Such fascinating writing. So this one centers around a woman who basically works at a convenience store full-time as a part of her job at an age where society tells her that she needs to be in a very high respected and valuable and high-paying job. At the same time, she's also not married at an age where others around her are having kids and those kids are grown up, and she is very confused as to why society is telling her what to do and who tells what is right. So it's all about her sort of struggle against society, and it's very inspirational and relatable because it's about challenging stereotypes and living the way that you want to live. The Japanese author saga, we have Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I hopefully pronounced that right. So this novel is basically divided into 4 chapters that all relate and come down to one mysterious coffee house. In that particular coffee house, there's one particular seat where you sit down and order coffee, and if you sit down on that seat, you can basically travel back in time and go back to a desired moment of the past. So whatever moment you think about, you basically are transported back to that moment in time. But here's the thing, whatever you do now that you're in your past, that's not going to change the present in any manner possible. And you also have to return to the present before your coffee that you're having gets cold. Otherwise, there are really bad situations that can happen to you that you really don't want. And it basically centers around the question of what would you change if you could travel back in time. Next we have Jacqueline Woodson's Red at the Bone. The second I looked at this cover, I was like, oh my god, I have to read this. Now look, hey, we all say that we don't judge books by covers, but as a matter of fact, most of us do. But I'm still glad I picked up this book because of its cover and because of some previous recommendations, because what's inside is just pure gold. So it's about 2 families who are very different in social class, but they are sort of brought together because of an unexpected pregnancy. Each chapter sort of tells the story through a different perspective, and the story therefore also travels back and forth in time, which makes it a bit confusing in the beginning, but if you stick on with it, it makes it a really interesting read because you get to know so many different perspectives. And it basically centers around decision making and how one makes decisions and the cost that those decisions can have on one's life. Next we have my favorite Japanese author, or one of my favorite authors of all time, Keigo Higashino's Malice. Now I just love the way Keigo Higashino writes. Like, his writing style is so different, it's direct, It's to the point. I love it. I'm all for it. Now, naturally, I love mystery books, anything that has to do with thriller or mystery. So I naturally gravitate towards such kind of books. And Malice, or in fact, any of Higashino's previous works that I've read, it just does it for me. So this story centers around the death, or rather murder, of a famous author, and he's found murdered in his apartment. And then there's this detective who gets on with the whole thing, you know, the whole shenanigan, like finding alibis, finding evidence, and how the story sort of unveils from there. But the thing that I like about Malice and Higashino's work in general is not so much about how the murder was done. It's more psychological. It's more about the why. Next we have Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I hopefully pronounced that right as well. This book's writing is art. It's genuinely the most elegant writing that I've ever read. It's very descriptive. It has a lot of metaphors. It has a lot of like comparisons and stuff. And I usually don't like to read that kind of stuff. But this book's writing is just, it's one of a kind, it's brilliant, it's fantastic. So this book centers around Hamnet, who was Shakespeare and his wife Agnes's son. He was a twin. And this book centers around the time of the Black Death, and Hamnet actually got the Black Death and unfortunately eventually passed away because of the plague. And it deals with how Agnes, who was the mother of Hamnet, dealt with this sort of situation, how she came to terms with this kind of situation. And this book surprisingly is not centered around Shakespeare, unlike most of the other things we read. It's more about the family that he left behind when he moved to London to become a major playwright. Now, Shakespeare eventually wrote a play called Hamlet, and many believe that Hamnet and Hamlet are interchangeable, so that play was actually named after his son, and it was inspired by this whole sort of situation and what he had to go through and deal with. And the writing of this book, like I said previously, it made me devastated. It tore me apart. I was about to cry in a lot of times, but it's devastating in a beautiful way. So read it. Next we have Delia Owens' Where the Crawdads Sing. Oh, I love this one. So this one is being made into a film, and deservedly so, because the story is just that good and the writing is also just great. I feel like I say that for everything, but hey, it's some of the books that I really like. And this one feels like a romance, a courtroom drama, and a murder mystery all in one. So the plot revolves around this dude Chase Andrews, who's like found murdered apparently, and a lot of people, they think that a girl who's called the Marsh Girl is the murderer without even sort of investigating the case, because she's the sort of girl who's very into nature and she just sort of sticks by herself. She doesn't really have any sort of human interaction. She's just in the forest by herself, and she's just, you know, finding out means to live, how to make clothes, how to eat, all by herself. She doesn't really go to school and stuff like that, so you get the picture. So everybody just sort of believes that she is the murderer, but alongside that, it's also about having her first sort of relationship where she discovers love, because that's her first form of like human interaction, and then she falls into the plot of the murder and the story just unveils from there. I feel like if I speak too much, I'm just gonna give it all away, but definitely read the book if you like mystery and romance together. Next we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book is my favorite fiction book of all time. I've read a lot of fiction and this one just stands apart from me. And this one also has a really special place in my heart because I was caught in a reading slump for almost like 4 or 5 years, and this book really got me. It like dragged me out of it because the writing and the story and the characters and the plot twist, they're just that good. So the story is about this really famous popular Hollywood actress by the name of Evelyn Hugo, as you can see on this like beautiful cover, and her story of having 7 husbands. Now people always, you know, read about her through these like magazines who, you know, like glorify and spice things up, but now she wants to tell her story in her own words. So she needs like a really reliable biographer to write down her story. And who does she call? Not some famous journalist at a famous firm or magazine company, but a journalist called Monique Grant, who really doesn't understand why the actress has called her herself, which is why when the whole story comes together and the plot twist, like the climax, unveils itself, it's the best, period. This book was also really relatable to me because every time I open this book, I genuinely wanted to know what was up with Evelyn Hugo. I mean, I guess that's the beauty of like class apart of writing. I genuinely felt that Evelyn Hugo was like a real legit actress, and that I would Google her up and I would get to know about her life and get to actually watch her films. And that I think is the main reason why I really like this book, because it feels like, you know, my best friend. Like I'm reading about my friend who I genuinely care about and want to know about. The last book and my most favorite book of this summer, and probably for a long time it will be, is The Essential Rumi, obviously by the really famous poet Rumi, and the full translation by Coleman Barks. Now, I'm the kind of person who always strays away from poetry. I just can't read it because I feel like it's so hard to read. You really have to understand the message and the meaning behind all those complicated words and similes and metaphors. But this book felt like reading philosophy, felt like talking to your best friend, and felt like reading a self-help book all in once. To prove my point on how beautiful the writing is, I'm gonna read one of the excerpts that I read in this book that I posted on my Instagram, so you can follow me over there if you want to, you know, keep up to date and stuff. So just let these words sink in. It says, "This is how Halat said, I am God, and told the truth. The ruby and the sunrise are one. Be courageous and discipline yourself. Completely become hearing and ear, and wear this sun ruby as an earring. Work. Keep digging your well. Don't think about getting off from work. Water is there somewhere. Submit to a daily practice. Your loyalty to that is a ring on the door. Keep knocking and the joy inside will eventually open a window, and look out to see who's there." Let me read you another one. "You think to make your living from tailoring, but then somehow money comes in through goldsmithing, which had never entered your mind. I don't know whether the union I want will come through my effort or my giving up effort, or from something completely separate from anything I do or don't do. I wait and fidget and flop about as a decapitated chicken does, knowing that the vital spirit has to escape this body eventually somehow. This desire will find an opening." I rest my case. You can judge from there. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Hopefully you guys found some nice reading recommendations that you can, you know, probably read for your summer, winter, wherever you are, whichever season you are in, whenever you're watching this video. If you liked it, like, comment and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so that you know whenever I upload one of these book vlogs or any of the other videos that I make. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye!